Well, thank you, and thanks for that introduction, Tanya. In this presentation, I'm going to talk about some of the programs that we use in the Southeast to bridge the gap between fire science, prescribed fire science, and natural resource management, with the ultimate goal to improve the management of wildland fire in the region. So it's been widely recognized that a gulf exists between the fire science and research communities. And in the context of the discussion today, we'll be talking about the gap between wildland fire scientists and wildland fire and prescribed fire managers. And this separation comes from differences in language, objectives, goals, incentives, operational timelines, and reward mechanisms. And the traditional model of applied fire science delivery has relied largely on the generation of peer-reviewed scientific publications and some form of trickle-down information transfer. But research has shown that this model is not effective for many different scenarios, including wildland fire. And Adams et al. Published in the International Journal of Wildland Fire a wonderful article that explores this gap and the breakdown of this model for getting recent and relevant research into the hands of wildland fire decision makers nationwide. And so, recognizing that gap, the Joint Fire Science Program, or JFSP, which provides funding and science delivery for scientific studies associated with managing wildland fire, with fuels treatments, with fire-impacted ecosystems, and they respond to the emerging needs of managers, practitioners, and policymakers from local to national levels. This group is jointly funded by the Department of the Interior and the U.S. Forest Service, and they are governed by a board of 12 members who represent the agencies shown there. Well, the Joint Fire Science Program leadership and their board recognize this disconnect between the science and the natural resource community. And they saw that the research that they were supporting was essentially not making it into the wildland fire and land managers in the field who they were hoping to support. So starting in the late 2000s, JFSP began developing plans for bridging the gap between the fire science community and the natural resource and wildland fire management community. And that process, they quickly realized that a one-size-fits-all approach for bridging that gap would not be appropriate given the geography of the wildland fire landscape in the U.S. Coast to coast, fuels are different, land management communities are different, and the challenges and science needs are different. You can see here on this graphic, this map of federally managed lands, just the great variety that exists across the country. And so starting around 2009, JFSP started the development of what would become the 15 regional members of the Fire Science Exchange Network. And based on regional natural fuel and fire regimes, the network ultimately now covers the entire US, including Alaska and Hawaii. And the role of the network is to serve as a boundary-spanning organization to bridge that gap between the wildland fire science and fire management communities. And the objectives are to share information and build relationships among the regional fire science management communities, to understand and promote the existing relevant fire science research, and to promote and share examples of successful science applications where science is being used in the decision-making process of wildland fire, of wildfire, and of prescribed fire, and to track and identify and share research needs from the field, and to recognize the knowledge gaps that exist so that science can then in turn tackle those problems. And so now to give a little bit more of a regional perspective for the Southeast. The southern U.S. is home to 37% of our country's population. Growth within the region is strong and it's anticipated to continue. Across the region, this growing population puts pressure and emphasis on the management of our conservation, on our military and our agricultural lands, and on our wildland fire management community. Tanya already introduced the concept of the wildland-urban interface. And on this map, if you're looking for the wildland-urban interface, just in terms of its presence, it's pretty easy to see there's quite a bit to find in the east. and the southeast as well. If you look at the density of the red, which is the intermix, and the yellow, which is the interface, just different definitions of this concept. In the eastern half of the country, look to the Piedmont, look along the coasts for sure. And by some accounts, half of the WUI regions in the US can be found in the south, and 3 of the top 4 states with the largest WUI area are in the south, in North Carolina and Texas and in Georgia, based on one mapping effort. It's also important to remember that fire managers in the south are a diverse group. This is a map of forest ownership in the US. All of the green is private, family, non-industrial ownership. And nearly 90% of the forest land in the southeast is owned by over 5 million private landowners. And if you talk to some folks, they would say that that means there are 5 million different reasons for managing land in the southeast. Now, if you look at the red on the map, red indicates federal forest land ownership. So looking here, you can see how wildland fire, both prescribed and wildfires, are issues in the eastern and southeastern US that impact all manage of property and jurisdictional boundaries. Ultimately, fire in the east and southeast demand collaboration from states, federal agencies, private landowners, industrial landowners, nonprofits, and others, just because of our diversity within the region. So now, keeping that WUI and that land ownership pattern map in mind, look at this map of MODIS fire detections from January through October of 2012. You can see that the southeastern US, it burns a lot. Across the south, we have about 45,000 wildfires that burn approximately 1 million acres per year. Of course, that's going to vary year to year. But of course, much of the south has evolved with a frequent fire regime. This beautiful map, a reconstruction by Guyette, Stambaugh, and others, called the PC2FM map. It uses the physical chemistry of fuels and climate to reconstruct fire frequency that existed on the landscape prior to 1850. And you can see that much of this south experienced fire every 2 to 4 years, with some areas pushing towards the range of every 6 years, and other areas expected to see fire on average less than every 2 years. So given that the plants and the animals of the region evolved with such frequent fire regime, it's no surprise that the southeast now leads the country in the use of prescribed fire. Those being the planned intentional fires designed to achieve objectives related to forestry, habitat management, fuels management, and range. And according to a survey by the Coalition of Prescribed Fire Councils, in 2014, approximately 11.7 million acres across the country were treated with prescribed fire. So that's for the whole country. In the southeast, accounted for a little over 8 million of those acres. The South also has a strong history in the development of fire science, not just the management, but also the science that supports it, with world-class researchers who for decades have worked to increase our understanding of the roles of fire in the region. Universities and colleges, the U.S. Forest Service Southern Research Station, NASA, USGS, and the USDA, along with legendary nonprofits with names that you've probably heard of, like Tall Timbers and Archibald Biological Station. And for a span of 30 years, we even had what may have been the world's first wildland fire research laboratory in Macon, Georgia, which unfortunately is no longer. So what makes fire in the South interesting, I think, is that much of the management, culture, and science have been tied to managing and using fire. Our wildland fire managers know that with our rapidly growing ecosystems and with ample natural, as in lightning, and human, as Tanya showed, across the country, ignition sources, it's not as if a place will burn, it's when. And because of that, prescribed fire and wildfire management are closely linked within the region. We have a year-round wildfire management culture that both lights and fights fires in many regions 12 months out of the year. And so going back to our bridge analogy, The role of the Southern Fire Exchange is to serve as a boundary-spanning organization to bridge the gap between the diverse fire science and fire management communities of the South so that both groups can achieve greater outcomes. And how do we do that? Well, partnerships in collaboration with a multifaceted science delivery strategy. Working with our advisory board and through needs assessments and surveys of regional fire managers across the Southeast, also working with land managers and researchers, we've identified 4 key topic areas for getting fire science into practice. Those being smoke and air quality, prescribed burning, fire ecology, and then wildfire mitigation and suppression. Our science delivery programs are designed to span the spectrum from user access materials to direct delivery content and to more personal interactions such as workshops and field tours, with the goal to provide a range of information exchange opportunities that require a range of user investment and engagement. We have a newsletter that synthesizes recent research topics relevant to the Southeast and includes new fire management and prescribed fire tools and models. We have fact sheets that synthesize and translate peer-reviewed publications that come from the research community, often 8 to 12 to 16-page documents. Our fact sheets drill those down into 2 to 3-page documents that allow potential management implications to be easily identified. But they're also peer-reviewed by the scientists and collaboratively produced to ensure their accuracy. We had one fact sheet that synthesized the results of 50 years of research in the South, focused on answering the question, how long does prescribed fire reduce wildfire risk? And one day after we put that fact sheet out, it was used by the Georgia Department of Natural Resources as a public outreach tool for folks who had questions about prescribed fire management as it related to wildfire management during the Type 1 incident West Mims fire in the Okefenokee Swamp region. We had another fact sheet that was one of the early tools for describing how the Avenza PDF's map mobile application could be used by prescribed burners, field researchers, and fire managers. And that became a training tool for a prescribed burn team for the state of Georgia. We also see that webinars are an efficient and effective way to use technology to connect our scientists and managers in the region. And last year, we hosted 14 webinars that reached almost 2,000 viewers. And over 90% of participants were satisfied with the content, and 85 participants indicated that the content could be used in their fire management program. And fire management programs, including the Everglades National Park, Florida Forest Service, University of Florida, and also other universities and community colleges have all used these webinars as training tools because these are opportunities to get relevant and timely research findings before they ever make it into the standard firefighting courses, fire training courses. Our fire workshops and field tours have been effective for bringing scientists and managers together for information exchange. Our Duff Fire Science Workshop last year brought leading scientists and experienced managers into the field to talk about the latest understanding and tools for reducing Duff Fire-induced pine mortality, a major issue for the region. We spent time inside with expert presentations, and then we moved into the field where we could all kick the dirt and talk about the challenges and successes and issues related to burning sites with heavy duff loads. These are sites that haven't had fire in decades. The workshop was a huge success, and we had multiple managers come back and tell us that this kinds of information that was presented absolutely changed the way that they use prescribed fire. Over the past 2 years, we've been excited to support and participate in an innovative collaborative event with the Prescribed Fire Science Consortium at Tall Timbers Research Station. For the past 2 years, they've had events that draw top wildland fire scientists from across the country for a week of coordinated measurements of experimental prescribed fires. So in addition to the exciting research and technology that are part of these events, a select cadre of experienced land managers from across the country are also fully integrated into the experience to get their input on the research and to begin to facilitate the building of trust and collaboration that can only come from working side by side in the field for a week. And we see this working in partnership with the Prescribed Fire Science Consortium as opportunities to facilitate a new model of adaptive fire science generation and management, wherein scientists and managers work together towards the development of applied fire science, very much like adaptive management in the field. And finally, we see our efforts to connect the wildland fire science and management communities as in support of the National Cohesive Wildland Fire Management Strategy. And the strategy recognizes that wildland fire does not stop at jurisdictional boundaries, and this is key in the Southeast, where we have so many of those. And I think that the South is leading the way in efforts to embody the vision of the strategy, to safely and effectively extinguish fire when needed, to use fire where allowable, and to manage our natural resources and as a nation live with wildland fire. So thank you very much, and we have our contact information there.